Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Plain English Finance Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you make smart financial decisions. I'm your host, Tre Bynoe, certified financial planner and chartered investment manager. I'm a financial planner with TC Wealth Management and Visa Wealth. For more information or to send your questions, check out the show notes on my website, trebynoe.ca/podcasts. And if you want to learn more about me, start with episodes 1 and 2. So this is the maiden episode with Sierra, my wife. How are you feeling today?
Hi. I'm feeling really good because we're finally starting the podcast, which is something that we've talked about for years.
Yeah, I think it's kind of exciting. We've been talking about it for, I don't know, it must be 6 years now or so. Even back in the day, recorded a few episodes and they never got out. But now's the time. So this is the first episode, so I kind of wanted to cover a little bit more about you, about me. The first 2 episodes of the podcast kind of gave an overview of me, but I'll go over it again briefly. Kind of wanted to talk about what the podcast was for. Yeah, kind of.
And your decision-making process, I think we had talked about in this episode.
Yes, and my decision-making process. So we'll get into that type of thing. Yeah, let's do it. So first off, what the podcast is about. So what's the podcast about, Cease?
You want me to answer? Okay, so our plan is to create episodes about financial literacy in a variety of topics. It's for the general public. Tre specializes in corporation owners, and so a few of the episodes will be naturally geared towards that, but most of the topics that we cover are going to be useful to everyone. So our plan is to kind of have a conversation, I guess, for some of these episodes, the ones that I'm in anyway. And Tre's going to kind of like talk about a topic, and I'm either going to learn about it on behalf of the audience and ask questions, hopefully on behalf of the audience, and what, normal, air quotes, people would ask and wondering. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the premise of it that we have decided to go with.
Yeah, that's a very politically correct way of doing it. Like that might be your purpose. My purpose is that there's some really bad advice out there, and people take advice from terrible sources that lead to really bad, or not bad, should I say, or some of them are bad, but not great outcomes. I was actually having this conversation with a client today, and we was talking about she didn't pay off her mortgage. So you know how I always say that probably it's unlikely that we'll ever not have a mortgage, because I would rather invest than pay it off. But we was having this conversation, and they decided to, many years ago, decided to invest over pay off their mortgage, and now they are well over $1 million better off because of it.
Wow.
So
I don't know why, but as you started talking, I thought that was going to take a different route. Maybe I'm the only one. I thought you were going to say that they should have paid off their mortgage. I was like, where is he going with this? But anyway, I don't know. We'll see if I was the only one who thought that.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, there's often a conflict between what people say is like the optimum thing to do versus the reality of it, and oftentimes it doesn't have as big an impact. Like there's certain things like when to take CBP, paying off your mortgage versus investing, buying a home all the time. Like people think that buying is definitely better than renting. Like there's certain things that people just tend to believe and like pass down to their kids, or their grandparents tell them to do this and do finance a certain way. And I think that at certain levels, that's, it's better than nothing, right? But there are those people like us that are not okay with mediocre and kind of want to look at, I know you don't like the word optimizing.
I don't mind it. It's,
there's some people that
everyone's obsessed with optimizing everything in their life. And sometimes I find that can get overwhelming, but that's not important. But one thing I did want to say is it's very human nature to want a yes or no answer for things. A lot of people, I should say, people love rules in order, like, to simplify their life, right? And I think that's why we're going to talk about your decision-making process, because people want simplicity. They don't want to have to think about every decision. And when you say things like, oh, buying a house is better than renting, when people have sayings like that they can just default to and not have to think about, it makes their life easier, right? So I understand that's the reason we have options, though, that's the reason why those options still exist, because in some situations it does work better, and everybody's favorite answer, it depends, is part of that equation. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say, is that people love to have like that black and white. They don't like gray area. Because for every decision you have to make, if you always had to look at every single piece of data to make decisions, you can't do that.
No, but you can. Like, I think that people should do the hard work once, and then create a system that automates that good decision.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
These snippets of advice that people don't really understand the impact of them, like the true impact, they can be good in certain situations. It's worth it to figure out if that situation is your situation or what you're going to do, and learn, or at least work with somebody that is willing to teach you and help you make a good decision, and then find a way to make a system that automates that good decision. And that kind of plays into my decision making process for sure. So let's talk a little bit about my decision making process. So
sure.
When I was trying to figure out how to put this, simplify it in a way that is easy to understand, I kind of
make it into steps.
I kind of thought of a few steps that you would take in order to replicate my type of decision-making process. And it's actually funny that this decision-making process is called the rational decision-making model or something like that. When I was growing up, my foster parents would call me Spock because I was like too logical. And I own it. I'm happy that has helped me achieve what we have achieved. But it is a very logical way of thinking about things, and my thought process is very, very much based on taking emotion out of it and relying on what the evidence says. So I do believe that there's only two people that you should really take advice from: people that have accomplished what you want to accomplish, or experts in the area. And I think that's really important, because there's lots of ways to screw something up, to do things wrong. And somebody that has failed to do something and then telling you what they would do if they had a chance again, like if they had a second chance, I would do it this way. Well, they haven't done it. That also could be a terrible way to do it, Yeah. So, go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add that people also like to, what's the word? Overvalue people that they're close to, their opinions of these things. So if you have a family member or friend who says things like, oh, if I was in your situation, I would XYZ. Oh, if I had another chance, like you said, I would do this, this, this. It's not, and you might be like, oh, that's good advice, because you care about this person and this person cares about you. The motive is good, but it doesn't mean the advice is good.
You're right. The motive can be great. That doesn't matter. I don't think that's bad to say, but it's the motive can be great, but you're the one that lives with the consequences of your choices. So just because you got advice from somebody that was well-intentioned, but it wasn't right for your situation, it doesn't matter that they're well-intentioned, because it wasn't right for your situation. You still have to live with the consequences of doing so. A really common one is school debt. Like the amount of parents that will encourage their kids to take on stupid amounts of debt to go to a certain type of school, it's crazy. And then that kid is left with more debt than they can really handle in a career path that wasn't great by parents that loved them and had their what they thought were their best interests at heart, but it didn't really matter because in the end of the day, it was a bad decision that you end up struggling for the next 10 years trying to dig yourself out of it. Some people never do, and it leads to more and more bad decisions. So from the get-go, you're put behind, all because you decided to listen to somebody that had your best interests at heart, but didn't give you
the
good
outcome
advice.
wasn't good. Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. You're starting out in the negative, which in life as an adult, a lot of kids do that. And I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do by any means. It's just that is a factor people maybe don't think about enough when they're deciding. Again, it falls into my thoughts of people loving black and white rules. They just want to say, you get out of high school, you go to school, you get your degree, you get a good job, you work hard, and you'll be happy. It's like, that's not quite. I wish it was that easy, but
not quite the way
it's not always the way it works. Yeah, and some people, a lot of people who are very successful, if you look at their backgrounds, that is not what they did, or their degree didn't help them, or anyway, it's not a debate on like whether or not to go to school. It's just an example of there's no cut and dry answers to things that involve finances where it's like, this is always the best option, always, 100% of the time.
For that person. But there are some objective things that it is like the right option most of the time.
But most of the time, not every time. Like, you know what?
No,
it's too hard to say that because there's gonna be somebody out there with some weird situation where you're the one person that this option actually kind of works for or whatever. So,
of course, but there are general rules that you can apply, and then you can find out why it doesn't apply to you.
Yes, but I would call that a principle versus a rule.
Yes, correct. You're right. Yeah, that'd be a principle. So there's some principles that we'll go through in this podcast in various episodes that apply to the majority of people, but there are the outliers. Correct.
Sorry, we're getting into semantics. Keep going. Yeah. You can keep going.
Let's talk about the decision-making process. So the step one of my decision-making process is to really define what the decision is. The second step is to get information based on like good information. And this is where a lot of people trip up, is they come to some pre-drawn conclusion and then they try to get information that supports this conclusion versus looking at what the data says, looking at what other people that have actually succeeded in achieving what they want to achieve, look at what that says, and then drawing a conclusion from that.
Would that be kind of a confirmation bias situation where they're like, I believe I'm just going to use the house example again because it's easy. I believe it's best to buy a house and not rent. And then they read an article and it's like, here's why it's better to buy a house and not rent. And they're like, see, it's better to buy. So they're looking, they have that belief first versus like looking at the whole picture and being like, okay, here are some other factors that I might need to consider in the grand scheme of things, and not let that bias cloud their judgment in the first place.
Absolutely. And a lot of these things that people like our optimizations are things that we do, for instance, doesn't apply to everybody because they don't have the discipline to do it. So buying versus renting is a really good point. The reason that it doesn't always work, that buying is better, is because the renter should be investing the difference, right? So it's cheaper to rent when you calculate all the costs that go into owning a house. And when somebody like myself is looking at that, or like the papers that are out there are looking at that debate, the renter is investing the difference. Well, if you lack the discipline to rent, to invest the difference, then it doesn't really apply to you. But I would argue that you have bigger issues and need to figure out your discipline. Okay, so then the next step is to evaluate the trade-offs between the decision that you have to make objectively and to keep emotions in check. Again, a big thing that people do is they tend to either underestimate the negatives of a decision or overestimate the positives.
Okay.
So, or vice versa, they'll overestimate the negatives. And a great example of that is investing. So people assume when it comes to risk, again, there'll be a different episode of this, but people assume that a high risk portfolio means lots of money can be lost. And that's not quite what it means. That's not one of the risks that you should be evaluating, especially in like a global index fund. It's just not the type, it's not the same type of risk. So, but people will not evaluate the trade-offs honestly. So that's an issue when it comes to decision making, something that is really important to keep the emotion in check, and then to pick the best path that makes sense for you and what you want to accomplish in your situation. And then the last path, which I can honestly say is probably the most important, is to automate it where possible. So to set up systems around it that make that decision that you've made as easy as possible. And that's kind of my... Yeah, go.
I was just going to say, can you recap the steps? Like, so step 1 is this, step 2 is this, just for everybody listening.
So step 1 is to define your goal that you're trying to define the decision that needs to be made. It's then to gather data on that decision and gather all types of data to evaluate the trade-offs and keep emotion in check when you're doing so, to then choose the best path and automate it when you can. That's kind of the decision-making process. And again, only 2 types of people that I'm willing to get when it comes to gathered data. There's only 2 types of people, or even to evaluate trade-offs. I'm looking at people that have done it and experts in the area. So that moves on to the reason that we started this podcast, and people should take note of what I have to say in some degree. I'm both of those things. We've done it in that we have been able to, from very humble beginnings, should we say, being able to build a net worth, reach financial goals faster than most Canadians our age. So that's something that, again, we've done it. So people should have that as something to like
some credibility
piece. And then the expert piece, I have lots of acronyms. You can go back to episodes 1 and 2 to hear about some of those. But I have my CFP, I have my CIM. I'm a financial planner. I've been doing this over a decade now. This is something that I live and breathe. So
he says that, and you won't probably think twice about that comment, but actually he does. He wakes up in the morning and he's on his phone, and what is he reading? Financial articles. Like, I walk downstairs on YouTube, what is he watching? Videos about other professionals' ideas on topics in finance. So yeah, Tre really does. He's really interested in this topic in and outside of work.
But I'm fortunate that, what they say, if you enjoy what you do, it doesn't feel like you work. I mean, there's different days where it does.
There's days, yeah. I don't know if I fully believe that.
Well, sometimes it doesn't feel like work. But,
a lot of the times.
But. A lot of the time. But anyway, before we sign up, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your history, your background, how you grew up, attitudes to money. That type of
thing. Do you want to do it as well, or do you want me to just do it?
Well, I'll give a brief rundown at the end, but I also have the first 2 episodes, which I go into it a little bit as well. So,
okay. Okay. A little bit about me. I grew up in a single parent household. It was my mom. My dad passed away when I was 8, and we were a low-income family prior to my dad passing away. So, of course, having 3 kids in the house and my mom now having to work, we were still low income after that. And because of that, I feel like I developed quite a scarcity mindset, I want to call it, towards money. That's how I would describe my feelings towards money. I think it's important for people to really think about their feelings. Think about your feelings towards money, and understand where it comes from, that will, in my opinion, that would help people be able to navigate changing behavior. That just takes a level of self-awareness. But that's how I would consider my background to money. I wanted to save it. I didn't like spending it because it felt like a resource that I wouldn't be able to keep earning, I guess. I would rather have the safety of having a balance that I can see versus spending my money on things. So yeah, that's how I grew up, I guess. It was just my influence. That's how I was influenced by money.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that will not relate to that, but there's a ton of people that will. What it actually means for you in practicality is that like the saving part of personal finance, you kind of had down just as a natural inclination. The wealth creation part, the investing part, the how do you manage money would have been terrifying for you. And the spending part of money and like keeping money in its place would have also been a struggle.
Yes. Yep, for sure.
And if you're going to pick a struggle, they're the two better ones to have than the other side, which is like people that just spend everything and like just put themselves in really bad positions. Definitely the better thing to have to work on, but something that you have to work on nonetheless.
Yes. You think something that we'll probably talk more about is you think you're good with money. And I would always think to myself, I'm pretty good with money because I never spend it. But like Tre said, it's not true because I didn't understand so many aspects about money. Like you said, risk. I would have considered myself risk averse, but I didn't understand risk. I didn't know what a mortgage was until I started working at a credit union. I was young, but needless to say, I had to learn a lot as I was going, and I think that's the most important thing, not to get stuck in your head that you know lots about money and try to continue learning from people who are experts or who have done it, like Tre said. But that's just challenge yourself in some of those thoughts that you have.
Yeah, great. And then for me, I was raised in it was a single parent household from my dad's side from the ages of 2 till 8. And I then ended up in the foster care system, lived with quite a few different families, which obviously I'm brushing over, but it was a really crappy time. Like it made me feel very insecure. So my attitude to money that I had to fix was around, I viewed it as a safety net, but I knew there was tons that I didn't know. And that's kind of what made me so interested in finances before. I have an accounting background. That's what I went to college for in the UK. So I had a few advantages there, I guess, in that I was already that way inclined. I have like an engineering mind type of mind. I know that maybe a lot of people will relate to what that means, but it's like a very logical way of processing information and looking for information. So I already knew that I didn't know even where to start. I was really fortunate though that there was one foster family that had done very well for themselves, completely self-made, and did it through just making really good decisions. And that made me understand that I was in control. And that's something that has guided us to where we are today, that it is on us, and we do have options and we do have choices, and it's up to us to make those decisions, and we have to live with the consequences of those decisions. A saying that I say is, burying your head in the sand doesn't make the demons go away. And the principle is that it's like we live with the consequences regardless of whether we choose to make the decision or not. It's just most times not making a decision is the worst decision we can make in that in that situation. And I see so many people where they are paralyzed by decisions. And most of the time, any decision apart from not making one would have been good. The amount of people that come to me in their mid-30s having like physically saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in a regular career, like physically saved it, not having $100,000 or $200,000 or $500,000. Like, do you know what it takes to actually save like $300,000-$400,000 into an account by the time you're 30? Like, that is.
And you're saying like without the use of investing.
Without the use of like interest and compound, like that is an incredible feat for somebody with an average career. And so these people are like, I imagine you would have been
yes,
incredible,
quite disciplined in that regard. Not in every regard, but in that regard.
But these people, there's some people out there that are just incredibly disciplined, incredible at saving, but they're terrified of making the decision that they need to make in order to get to the next step.
And that's another one of your sayings is no decision is still a decision. Absolutely. I think that really stuck with me. There's a few sayings that are very trademark Tre, that you've said and have kind of blown my mind. I want to say like very profound sayings that I'm like, I'm keeping that in my head, and closing your eyes doesn't make the demons go away is one of them, because sometimes the truth kind of hurts, like it stings, and you're like, I just don't want to. I know that's a problem, because we all know, when something's a problem and you just kind of want to avoid it. Some people, and doing that just lets it have power over you. And I hate like using those jargony words, corporate-y sounding things, but it's true. It does. When you open your eyes and say, here's the problem, I see the problem, I'm going to face the problem head on, that empowers you to take back control and make those decisions to get to where you actually want to go. And I think you're right in step one, defining the goal is hard for people sometimes, because actually knowing what you want and not making it vague is a little bit difficult sometimes, and it takes some of that, like I said, self-awareness or understanding what is important to you, what your values are, etc. So all that being said, great quotes, and hopefully you'll keep them in mind too, because they do come up in my mind when I'm falling back into bad habits or patterns. I'm like, oh, no decision is still a decision.
As you cry.
Yeah.
No, I just, it is one of those things that ultimately, if you're going to achieve something, if you're going to achieve goals and you have big goals, you have to take ownership for. You have to take ownership for your decisions and do what you can, right? That's the only thing that you can really control is what you do. So you make good decisions. That's kind of how we've approached life, how we've approached creating wealth for ourselves, how we've approached how we budget it. There's so many things that we have approached this way that has worked out. And another part of my decision-making process, I guess, is like the type of decisions that I make and not ones that the way I describe it is like in baseball, where you have a choice, like you have the pitcher that throws you the ball and you have the choice of like, do I go for a home run, swing with everything I have, but then if I miss, probably going to get out, or you can make the choice of less power, more accuracy, go for second base. You're more likely to win championships and win the long game by not taking the risk of getting out. And I use baseball, but like I think more cricket, because that's if you're outside of North America. You're
British.
Yeah, cricket is a much bigger sport than what it seems like in North America. But there's certain like types of games. There's like a 20-20 in cricket where it's like only 20 overs or whatever. I'm sure maybe during this podcast you'll learn more about cricket than you thought you did too. But then there's also like Test series, which is 3 days of cricket, and you tend to not take as many risks because you're playing the long game. But with like the 2020, you're playing the short game, so you're willing to take more risks. And it's very similar when it comes to finance, that you were playing the long game. If you want to give yourself the best chance of results, it's going to be playing the long game and making good decisions. If you have very little time and you need big results, well, that's when you kind of have no other option. You have to go for the home runs. So yeah, that's kind of the way I view a lot of decisions when it comes to personal finance as well. But anyway, I think that's it for the first episode. Hopefully you learned something. If you do have any questions or any comments, please feel free to reach out and check out my website for the show notes. And then we will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Plain English Finance Podcast. Tre Bynoe, Certified Financial Planner, Chartered Investment Manager, is a financial planner with TC Wealth Management and Aviso Wealth. You should always consult with your financial, legal, and tax advisors before making changes. This podcast is provided as a general source of information and should not be considered personal investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The views expressed are those of the individual and are not necessarily those of Aviso Financial Inc. Mutual funds and other securities are offered through Aviso Wealth, a division of Aviso Financial Inc.